Hi guys, my name is Shane Cuthbert. Thanks again for watching. Now, it's no secret that the people that we surround ourselves with, their voice and their opinions, starts to filter into, our unconscious mind, and we start thinking the same way. It really starts to infiltrate into our own way of thinking and change our way of thinking. The real benefit to therapy is that we can be a little bit more open. So with these people, when we share our own thoughts, we can just be a little bit more open about, what's really happening for us. We don't really have to worry about, that positive or negative reaction to it. We don't have to worry about somebody, hurting somebody's feelings, or, we don't have to worry about what someone else would think about us. We have that freedom in therapy, which means that we also have, it's much better space to, start to make those changes and change our environment. Just by sitting down with a therapist, we're already changing our environment by one person, okay? Now, the time you get to spend with that therapist is very, very minimal. So the impact that they have obviously is limited. But, the impact that they do have long-term can be really, really well. When you start seeing that person and you build that relationship over a long period of time, and the better the therapist, the less time they really need to spend with you to be able to uncover those own ways that you think, and uncover those thoughts for you to change the way that you're thinking. The therapy room is completely free of judgment, okay? You can be completely open and honest, and again, we have that freedom in the therapy room. When you're talking with friends or families, you have to be worried about, offending them or how they're going to view what you have to say. And it means that that's sort of a bit of a barrier, it's holding us back. We almost have to pretend to be somebody else, or we have to filter what we're saying and filter our emotions. In therapy, we don't have to do that, and that's the beautiful thing about therapy. If done right, the therapist's voice becomes like, the researcher Rosenthal in the Pygmalion studies. Then the inner parental voice is almost like, your school teacher or your parent, whose expectations create a change in that child's identity. And our inner child, quite simply, is like the student, the kid in the class. It's about to undergo an identity transformation. It's the exact same relationship and the exact same dynamics, of what's going on in the therapy room. It's the same, familiar pattern, and therefore it's the most powerful way to make that identity change. It's the easiest way to reprogram that inner parent to reparent that inner child. Now, the harsh reality is not all therapists have this effect. Otherwise, all therapy would be successful. There's a lot of therapy that isn't successful. And there's a lot of different therapists out there that, do a lot of different things. They come from a lot of different backgrounds. They have a lot of different, experiences. The trick is to find a therapist who your inner child would see in a similar way to your favorite teacher at school, okay? So the trick is to find, obviously a therapist that you have that rapport with, that you feel a sense of, I sort of like this person, I look up to this person. Because when you look up to that person, when they, give you those expectations or those, tricks or tips or things to do, you're really going to take that in better than someone that you don't like. When someone you don't like says something to you, you don't really listen to it. When you really take, powerful things in, it's usually from those people that you look up to. You almost want to be like them. You respect them. You're really going to get the best benefit out of someone that you can see, sort of like your favorite teacher. Now, if you think about your favorite teacher at school, now you think that you had a respect for them, you were able to learn more, and because of that respect, and because you like them, and because they were obviously presenting, this stuff in a way that, you liked it. They were on your level. They got down to your level. You think about the qualities that your favorite teacher at school had, and then compare that with the results that you were able to get from those, particular teachers. You learnt more. You learn more from people that you, respect, okay? Respect enough to know that what they're saying is true and, it's correct. But you like them, so you naturally just want to learn more and you want to know more about them. The thing that a lot of them do these days, especially with life coaches and influencers, They do this thing where they're just sort of like saying, hey, look at me. I'm cool, I'm popular. If you join, my group, I'll teach you how to be cool and popular as well. I'll teach you how to share inspirational quotes on Facebook. I'll teach you how to share, all of these cool sort of things that I'm posting. We can connect. Now, this is just like the kid at school that tried to recruit other kids into their group so they could feel more cool and more popular. And that's great, okay? But the reality is, it's going to be in your best interest. You're going to learn a lot more if you decide to hang back at lunch with the teacher and do some private tuition instead. So after you've had a couple of sessions with your therapist after you've got familiar with them, after you've become open and free with them, and once you've sort of started getting to that point where you're starting to think about ways in which they think and things that they might say on particular occasions, this is when you start learning how to do the fourth step in the self-communication process. The fourth step in the self-communication process is asking yourself, being able to step outside of yourself and ask yourself, what would my therapist say about this? In fact, let's go further than that. Let's go a step further than that, okay? Let's go further than asking your therapist what your therapist would say about that situation. I found that one of the best forms of therapy is solution-focused therapy, okay? And that's where you focus on the solution. Here's how solution-based therapy works. So let's say you go to your therapist and you say something like, look, this thing's really, bugging me. My co-workers at work, in my work, are, not making me feel very good. I've got this problem there. It's giving me a lot of anxiety when I'm at work, and when I come home, I'm feeling really, really depressed. Now, your therapist focusing on that solution might say something like, okay, just imagine you went to sleep tonight and you went to sleep, and let's just say that, for example, when you woke up, a miracle had occurred through the night, while you were dreaming and, faraway lands, a miracle happened. And when you woke up in that morning, that thing that was affecting you or making you feel anxious and making you feel depressed was just magically gone. It wasn't a problem anymore, okay? So you're still the same person, you look the same, you feel the same, you're at the same job with the same people, but magically, that problem wasn't there anymore. Or, let's say, for example, you jump in a time machine, your future self has learnt to grow out of that problem. And now you're doing the solution rather than doing the problem. So how would things be different? How would you think about that? Okay, these miracles happen. What would you be? You're in the future, you're this person now that problem no longer affects. How are you acting differently? How are you thinking differently? How are you feeling differently? The question now is, how would you act as if that problem was no longer a problem? How would you act as if you've already grown into that future self? How would you act as if you're already doing the solution? You've already solved that problem. How would you act if that problem wasn't there anymore? How differently would you think, act, and feel? Because we have an unconscious addiction to familiarity, and this sort of thinking is new to us, it's different to us, your initial sort of reaction is probably going to be, I don't know. Like, what a funny question to ask. Well, I've never thought that way. I've never thought about that. Like, I've come to therapy to, try to get some help. I mean, like, miracles aren't happening. I'm not going to wake up tonight and a miracle has happened. But I promise you, if you keep going, okay, if you have some resilience and you have some persistence and you keep thinking this way, okay, and, over time you keep thinking, how would the person that I want to be react in this situation? What would they say? What would they feel? You're going to start to, make better sense of it, and you're really just going to start unconsciously conditioning yourself to think differently, and the problem is, over time, magically going to go away. It's actually magically going to go away. If you persist and you keep bringing yourself back to that picture or that idea of how, your future self would do it, or how things look in the future, eventually that picture in the future starts to become the reality of, I guess, the present. That picture of how your future self would do something or feel or act really becomes a part of who you are now. So step 4 in the self-communication process is really going to be, what would my therapist say about this particular situation? But over time, the question then becomes, what would my future self say? What would I say to myself if I no longer had that problem, if I wasn't in that problem space and I didn't have that problem thinking? And you really start to practice that with repetition, and it just starts to become naturally for you. You start to change your identity so that you can become that person that you want to become with the changed identity. If my future self was my therapist, what advice would they give me about this particular situation? The relationship between our therapist and our inner dynamics can be very similar to the relationship dynamics between the Rosenthal researchers and the interactions between the young students and their teachers. It's therefore important to choose a therapist you not only trust, but view with respect, okay? You've got to like them, similar to how you would have viewed your favourite teacher growing up. To integrate that therapist's voice into your mind faster, it's important to stop and ask yourself, what would my therapist say with repetition? Consciously practice anticipating their response and integrating that into your own thinking. Then go one step further. Ask yourself how you would think. Feel and act as if you've already grown into your desired future self, which is now free of that problem. This is going to feel awkward at first because it's an unfamiliar way of thinking, but with repetition and perseverance, it will become easier.